The diaspora was still a dangerous word in Turkey. Diaspora was always meaning something Armenian, far, remote, and dangerous, homogeneous thing. But now we are learning, as everybody, that diaspora is not diaspora, but diasporas. It is a very heterogeneous. It has a very heterogeneous meaning and very different people. So, working on diasporas, I think that it will help the Turkish people too. Because diaspora is not this community who left this place or who was pushed from this place, but it's also, it leaves an empty place. So it is not a problem for only Armenians or Armenian identity, but also it is a problem for Turkish society. So diaspora is not just there, but it is certainly here. Anyway, these are long debates. I will play just my role of moderator. First, I will give the floor to Carel Bertram, who is Associate Professor at the Faculty of Middle East and Islamic Studies, School of Humanities and Liberal Studies in San Francisco State University. Her fields of research are space, memory and historical consciousness, the Ottoman Empire and the Turkish Republic. She is also the author of Images of Place, the Legacy of Ottoman Past in Modern Turkey. And it is works are translated into Turkish, and she is currently finishing a monograph on diasporic Armenians who traveled to Anatolia between 1950 and the present to find the villages and houses lost by their families in the genocide of 1915. Yes, please, it's yours.
Thank you. Is that on? And I should have an image coming up. So I'm working on two computers here, so hopefully this will work. Thank you all for this opportunity to share my work with you and to hear from you too. For the last 10 years, I've been following Armenians from America whose families were survivors of the genocidal long era in Turkey as they search in Anatolia for their family's lost house. They're always in hope of finding that house, but if they don't, then they're very grateful to consider the town or village that they do find as a surrogate for that house. Let's see how we can do this. I've constructed an archive of over 400 travelers' experiences that span a period of at least 30 years, plus my own observations made while traveling with 12 groups of pilgrims between 2007 and 2015. Is anything moving up there?
It is slow.
It's moving down here, but not there. So you'll be behind. You'll have to just figure that out. No, it's on another time. Most of these travelers, but not all of them, traveled with Armen Aroyan. Most refer to themselves as pilgrims, and I have ended up calling them pilgrims too. My material is highly personal. It relates to real travelers with real histories. Their memories are entirely autobiographical in that their attachment to place, the reason that they have come on these pilgrimages, stems from their own hearing of stories from their families. In other words, the stories may be about Hüseyinik or Tokat, but their memory is of hearing these stories. And although they may augment the stories with new information, their memory is neither collective nor inherited. It's entirely their own. The memory is also doubly inflected. They may refer to Kilis or Argen, but the stories were heard in Detroit or in Glendale. And today I am going to discuss how this place and memory connection identifies identity, and today how one powerful link is in the objects that pilgrims bring with them. Let's see where we are. For example, Marianne Kazanjian had a huge suitcase full of things that she brought with her. I was entirely shocked, including her uncle's hand-drawn family tree from Yozgat and a photo of her family, of her father when he lived in Yozgat in 1912. In Yozgat, Marianne found what she believes is her ancestral house, now an Ottoman house museum. And the stories of her experiencing this house, along with the photos that she took while she was there, and then integrated into her own family photos on her return to Massachusetts, caused a reassembling of her memory and a hardening of her Anatolian identity. But perhaps more surprising are the many pilgrims who bring things that they plan to leave behind. And I interpret this planting of objects as votive offerings, part of a group of rituals that I see emerging as a category of trauma-inflicted heritage pilgrimage. As with the bringing of objects, these rituals of leaving behind are absolutely place-related, and in fact, votives are placed in the only place where they can satisfy a need of the soul that has no other way of being satisfied. As one illustration among many, I introduce you to Lynn Derderian. All of her family is rooted in Diyarbakir, and Diyarbakir was the reason that she traveled to Anatolia. She traveled in May of 2015 under the guidance of Armin Aroyan. Lynn brought 2 photographs. One was of her grandmother Nafina with her 2 daughters. It was taken in Aleppo, and after they had survived the death marches of 1915, but before going to New Jersey in 1920. One of Nafina's daughters would become Lynn's mother. The second was a photograph of some of Nafina's family that had been lost in the massacres. And Lynn brought a family tree of Nafina's side of the family. Her plan was to leave these documents in the newly restored Srp Giragos church, which surely had been a place where her family had worshipped, and also a place that she could visit. She had no photographs of her father's Diyarbakir family, who had come to Fresno, California, following the Higutyun massacres. Those grandparents had died before she was born, so Lynn's personal memory stories of Diyarbakir were rooted in East Orange and then Englewood, New Jersey, where she, her mother, and her sister Karen traveled from Fresno to spend their summers with grandmother Nafina and the tightly knit family. In New Jersey, she loved to brush her grandmother's long hair using a jade green brush from the Bakelite set in front of the mirror. As I was doing that, she would tell me stories, only 2 of which I remember. The first was that my grandmother had never had to brush her own hair at home. This was always done by servants. And also, when she went horseback riding at their country home, she wore a belt studded with jewels. The second was that in Diyarbakir, they lived in an enormous house with a huge cellar where her father, a dry goods merchant, would store goods in jars that were so large she could not see their tops. As a child, Lynn had not thought about asking for more information, but it might not have helped, for except when it resurfaced in nightmares, the book of Nafina's past was closed. Even questions had disappeared into the silences until Lynn's cousin Peter Balakian, whom you might know, who is Nafina's grandson by her second marriage, began to ask about the history of his beloved grandmother. He chronicled this poignant and poetic quest in Black Dog of Fate. It was Peter who had organized this family trip that included his own mother, Nafina's daughter Arax, his siblings, his children, and his cousins Lynn and Karen. Because he and Lynn had been especially close all their lives, they sat together on Armin's bus, she holding her photographs as Diyarbakir came into view. So I had this hidden hope. Maybe I'll see something, maybe I won't. Maybe nothing will really happen. But something did happen, and it began as she felt the city's nearness. We looked out the window, and Peter said, "This looks like Colorado, the Southwest." No, Peter. This is Interstate 5 going to Fresno. This is the San Joaquin Valley. I get chills just thinking about it because that was the first stunning recognition for me. It was like, oh, God, this is my landscape. This is the landscape I grew up in. And this is the landscape of my ancestors. The whole notion of home started happening right then. I want to make sure I'm in the right place. Waking up in Diyarbakir the morning that she was going to go to the church, Lynn felt a pressing urge to write down everyone's name in her own hand. She did this below the family tree that she had brought to leave behind. This meant adding her father's side to the page. I just thought, oh, what a good idea. I'll write all the names down. And so her father and his family made their appearance in Diyarbakir in her handwriting. In Sırp Giragos, she first lit a candle. Then she opened the paper with the names. It was at that moment that suddenly everything became a rush of emotion. The genocide in its overwhelming magnitude and the images of people lost. And just as suddenly and just as unexpectedly to her, Lynn began to read her family names aloud. And I lit the candle and I thought, I have to read the names. The space that Lynn had created was a spiritual space of home at its most profound level. But it was not a religious space. There were no prayers to God, and there were no prayers at all. Still, she took Armin's encouragement to cross the barrier to the central altar of the church's famous 7 altars and hid her votives in an envelope under the rug on top of the altar right above the cross. But I suggest that she was at that moment not in a church so much as in the center of her ancestral houseworld. It was the family I didn't know, the people who were murdered. It was gratitude for those who survived. It was anger that I know nothing, gratitude that I was bringing them home. An obvious explanation of these photographs is that they, like the whispered and written names, are left as surrogates for the people they represent. And most of the pilgrims who leave photographs do imagine a bringing home scenario. But my data would suggest something different. I suggest that here, at what feels like home, these votives actually lose the possibility of representing return. Yes, Lynn brought her family along as photographs, but what she knew about them could never let her leave them behind, even if she had found the lost house, which she could not do. Above all, she would never consider leaving her grandmother, who had told her daughter, "I never want to see Diyarbakir again in my life, never." In these poignant encounters with home, the true nature of the votive reveals itself as a way to ground oneself in a spiritual world. In other words, a votive is never a surrogate for someone else. Rather, it is always an extension of the devotee. For Lynn, it signaled an effort to participate in an empathetic unity with her family in their home and to become a participant in a shared story. Furthermore, votive acts are always locational. The devotee must place them somewhere very specific in order that they may work their miracles and provide their permanence. It was here that allowed Lynn to anchor herself and her Fresno, New Jersey self to an Anatolian home. But at the same time, it highlighted that her effort of agency, of placing herself in the story here, was an act of impossibility. As she entered Diyarbakir, the sense of home as Fresno was a surprise, but also a relief. The family group had been traveling with a heightening sense of agitation as they experienced example after example of denial. For Lynn, then, it was a sense of belonging that lent a hopeful sense of rightness. This rightness was underlined by Peter being celebrated by a poetry reading with the Kurdish poet Kawa Namir. Here, Lynn began to experience Diyarbakir as an enormous embrace. And yet, the poignancy of that Kurdish embrace also served to highlight the moral quagmire of Anatolia. The welcoming Armenians was a potentially risky business in a Diyarbakir in which Kurdish lives and futures were at risk. The riskiness highlighted that the embrace was perhaps meaning that things had not changed. As their bus left Diyarbakir, another traveler, Armin Marsubian, read the last letter from his great-grandfather, making this impossibility feel current. The letter ended with, "My beloved son, probably this will be my last letter to you." When he read that, I was shattered, said Lynn. It was shattering, and it came right back. We had just left this huge embrace, but by God, it could all happen again tomorrow. In fact, it was still happening. Yes, her powerful ritual offering had physically placed her in the trajectory and dynamic of her own Armenian, California, New Jersey, Diyarbakir stories, an act that in itself affirmed identity. But it also placed her in her memory stories into a landscape of a continuing brutal loss. As an antidote to the past, her ritual was entirely unsuccessful. Nonetheless, she had whispered names in the one place where their owners past might hear them, tying her profoundly to a place that she almost could not wait to leave. Thank you.